being wrongly convicted for a crime you didn't commit. The prosecution thinks they've got a strong case, and you're worried that your defense team might not be up to the task. Even worse, your trial will be decided by a single judge. If there is just a hint of bias from that judge against you, it could be a long stint behind bars. You pray the wits and skill of your defense team will be enough, and that maybe the prosecution might drop the ball. Unless, of course, you live in the US or a handful of other countries that use the jury system. America's jury system is based on affording everybody the right to a fair trial. It fully represents the ethos of being innocent until proven guilty, and it's a keystone of the American legal system. This is a rarity, though. Around the world, it's easier to count the countries that do have jury trials instead of those that don't. Apart from the US, there's Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Ireland, and, of course, Britain, where the jury system was conceived. As the British developed colonies in the New World and Oceania, the new settlements carried on the British legal traditions, with juries being a major inclusion. China, Germany, Mexico, India, and Japan are just some of the nations that don't have juries. Each country's different, but for the main part, criminal and civil cases are decided by judges. The concept of a jury dates way back to the ancient world. Civilizations in Egypt, Greece, and Rome all used some form of jury trial. The Greeks were particularly concerned at the risk of corruption during a trial, and to combat this, they often assembled huge juries of up to 500 or more citizens. The concept of juries was brought to America by the early settlers from England. The Pilgrims were determined to uphold the British system of justice, and in 1623, this was included in the colony laws. It was written that every man should be tried by the verdict of 12 honest men. This early 12-member jury structure is still prevalent in the U.S. today. Gradually, in the early colonies like Massachusetts and Pennsylvania, jury trials became a legal institution. The United States jury system was officially created not long after the American Revolution in 1783. The founders of the new nation wanted to build a country based on the democratic ideals that were in the roots of the Revolution. It's also believed that by ensuring everyone had the right to a jury, it would keep government overreach and corruption in check. America's trial by jury system was largely derived from England's Magna Carta Charter of 1215. This was the English Charter of Rights that was signed by King John. It was decreed that no man was above the law, even the king, and that everybody deserved certain civil rights. The right to a fair trial by jury was one of these. James Madison was a vocal advocate of applying the Magna Carta's framework to the U.S. Constitution. Madison was one of America's founding fathers, and he worked with other statesmen to add the Bill of Rights in 1791. This was designed to specifically guarantee jury trials for citizens and to limit the absolute power of the federal government. Madison had introduced the Sixth Amendment to Congress, stipulating the right to a public trial by an impartial jury. It was crucial that defendants be given the right to an attorney and for cases to be decided on evidence and facts. This formed the backbone of the jury system in America today. Juries were originally made up of 12 randomly selected citizens, which is basically how modern-day juries operate. Also common with today is the stipulation that if a civil dispute was over $20, then the case had to go to trial. This was written in the Seventh Amendment and is still very much part of the modern trial process. The first jurors in the United States were generally white men, chosen from the jurisdiction where the criminal or civil action took place. Over time, though, jury laws began to change, allowing non-white jurors and then women to sit on juries. Another rule that hasn't changed is compulsory attendance if selected for jury duty. As far back as the 17th century, people were fined for failing to carry out their jury duties. Today, that is still very much the case, and it carries a fine of $2,000. Serving on a jury is part of an American's civic duty. Anyone aged 18 or over without criminal record is eligible to serve as a juror. Juror candidate lists are compiled from voting registers and driving license registrations. The jurors generally come from the county or jurisdiction where the case is based. Once the names have been selected, the jurors are then notified by mail. There are two types of jury trials: criminal and civil. Criminal trials are when the state or federal government prosecutes someone over an alleged crime, such as assault, robbery, or murder. Civil trials are far more concerned with disputes over money, and they can range from lawsuits to damages claims. However, not all cases actually go to trial. A grand jury meets in private to determine if a case should go to trial. Grand juries tend to be larger, with 16 to 23 members depending on the state or county. Trial, or petit juries? Apologies. They decide criminal and civil cases. These are the juries that we think of when we imagine courtroom dramas, with prosecutors and lawyers grandstanding for the jurors. If a case goes to trial, then the jurors are questioned and then selected by legal teams. Anyone with a conflict of interest is ineligible to serve. A conflict of interest usually means a person who either knows somebody involved in the case or is privy to information regarding the case. The prosecutor and defense attorney will carefully grill each potential juror to make sure that there are no biases or prejudices that could come back to bite them later in the trial. When a case goes to trial, it's up to the jury to make a verdict. The jurors have to analyze the evidence, take notes, follow any instructions, and then discuss the case with each other behind closed doors. These detailed discussions are also known as deliberations and are led by the jury foreperson. It's from here that things often get complicated. Once the jury comes to a decision, they have to let the presiding judge know. In many cases, the jury's verdict must be unanimous. If a unanimous decision can't be made, there is a hung jury, and the judge will dismiss the case as a mistrial. A hung jury can lead to a real mix of emotions. It can be at once cruelly frustrating and a massive relief depending on where you sit. Mistrials aren't always tried again, although the charges against the defendant do remain, keeping the option open for the government at a later date. In the majority of states, serious criminal trials must deliver a unanimous verdict, whether it's guilty or not guilty. However, in other trials, a simple majority verdict is enough. Once a majority decision is reached, the judge can move on with sentencing and settlements. This is more likely to occur in a civil case. For example, in the state of New York, the same decision must be reached by 5 out of 6 jurors on a civil case. If a hung jury results in someone being freed, they cannot be tried again on the same charges. This leads to double jeopardy, which is against the U.S. Constitution. Such was the case in the arguably the most famous criminal trial of all time, O.J. Simpson murder trial. When the prosecution failed to fully convince the jury that Simpson had committed 2 murders, the jury couldn't agree on a verdict, so that resulted in a hung jury. Simpson was free to go, and he couldn't be tried on the same charges again because of the double jeopardy stipulation. For a retrial to take place, the prosecution has to come up with new charges or new evidence. While Simpson was allowed to walk, it was a different matter for that 70s show actor Danny Masterson. In 2022, Masterson was charged with 3 counts of rape and went to trial. However, the jury was split and failed to reach a unanimous verdict, which resulted in a mistrial. However, the prosecutors pushed for a retrial on the grounds that they have new evidence relating to Masterson drugging his victims. A year later, a new jury reached a unanimous verdict of guilty, and the actor was sentenced to 30 years in jail. People have used juries since ancient times because they provide impartiality. They ensure verdicts are aligned with society's moral standards. The jury system perfectly reflects why the American Constitution was created in the first place. Juries are truly representative of the people of the United States. We the people.